The Black Cat, a Gothic horror story by Edgar Allan Poe, retold in simple modern English. Edgar Allan Poe was one of the masters of mystery and psychological horror. His stories often explore guilt, fear, madness, and the darker side of the human mind. This story is told by a man awaiting execution. He insists that he is not insane, yet he describes a series of terrible events that led him to commit a horrifying crime. At the center of the story is a black cat, a symbol of superstition, guilt, and the consequences of cruelty. So, dim the lights and listen carefully, for this is a tale that lingers in the shadows long after it is told. Let's begin. Tomorrow, I will die. Because of that, I want to tell the truth about the strange events that destroyed my life. I do not expect anyone to believe me. The things I describe seem impossible, even to me. Yet everything happened exactly as I tell it. As a child, I was known for my kindness. I loved animals and enjoyed caring for them. My parents often brought pets into our home, and I spent much of my time with them. When I grew older, I married a woman who shared my love of animals. Together, we kept many pets: birds, rabbits, a monkey, a dog, and several cats. One cat was my particular favorite. He was a large, beautiful black cat named Pluto. He followed me everywhere. He slept near me, sat beside me, and greeted me whenever I came home. For years, he was my closest companion. At first, I treated him with affection and care, but gradually, something changed. I began drinking heavily. Alcohol transformed my personality. I became irritable, selfish, and cruel. I lost patience easily and often treated my wife badly. Eventually, I began mistreating my animals as well. Yet Pluto remained loyal to me. No matter how harshly I behaved, he continued to follow me. Then, one night, I returned home drunk. I imagined that Pluto was avoiding me. When I tried to grab him, he became frightened and scratched my hand. Instantly, a terrible rage took hold of me. Without thinking, I pulled a small knife from my pocket, and in my madness, I cut out one of the cat's eyes. God forgive me for what I had done. For several weeks after that terrible night, Pluto avoided me whenever he could. The sight of the injured animal filled me with shame. At first, I felt genuine remorse for what I had done. But instead of changing my behavior, I continued drinking. Gradually, the shame faded and was replaced by irritation. I began to hate the cat. Pluto, now blind in one eye, still moved cautiously around the house. Although he no longer approached me with the same affection, he seemed to fear me more than anything else. His fear angered me. The more innocent he appeared, the more I resented him. Looking back, I can hardly explain my feelings. It was as if some evil force had taken control of my mind. I knew what I was doing was wrong, yet I felt driven to do it, as though I could no longer resist the darkness within me. One morning, while still under the influence of alcohol, I committed an act that would haunt me forever. I took a rope and placed it around Pluto's neck. The poor animal struggled helplessly. Tears filled my eyes as I carried out the deed. for I knew he loved me, and he had done nothing to deserve such cruelty. Yet, I continued. I hanged him from a tree beside the house. When it was over, I walked away sick with guilt. That night, as I lay in bed, I could not stop thinking about what I had done. Then, in the middle of the night, I was awakened by cries of alarm. The house was on fire. Flames spread rapidly through the rooms. My wife, a servant, and I barely escaped with our lives. By morning, almost everything had been destroyed. Only one wall remained standing. A large crowd gathered to examine the ruins. As I approached the wall, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There, burned into the white plaster, was the image of a gigantic cat. The figure was unmistakable. It showed a black cat hanging by a rope around its neck. The crowd stared at it in amazement. So did I. For a moment, I was overwhelmed with terror. Had Pluto somehow returned from the dead? Was this a sign of punishment for my crime? Later, I forced myself to find a rational explanation. Someone, I reasoned, must have cut down the cat during the fire and thrown the body through a window to wake us. The heat and chemicals in the wall could have created the image. The explanation seemed possible. Yet, despite my efforts to convince myself, I could never completely forget what I had seen. Months passed. The memory of Pluto continued to trouble me. And then, one night, in a dark tavern, I saw another black cat. The cat was sitting quietly on top of a large barrel in a dark corner of the tavern. At first glance, it looked almost identical to Pluto. It was large, completely black, and missing one eye. The resemblance was so remarkable that I could hardly believe it. As I approached, the animal seemed friendly and immediately allowed me to stroke it. The tavern owner told me that he had never seen the cat before and did not know who it belonged to. The animal appeared to have adopted the place as its home. When I left the tavern, the cat followed me. Several times I tried to send it away, but it continued after me. Eventually, I allowed it to come home. My wife was delighted. She immediately grew fond of the creature and treated it kindly. At first, I was pleased as well. The cat's companionship seemed to ease some of the guilt that had troubled me since Pluto's death. Yet before long, my feelings began to change. Something about the animal began to trouble me. There was one important difference between this cat and Pluto. On its chest was a large patch of white fur. At first, the marking seemed random and unremarkable. But as time passed, I began to imagine that the shape was changing. Little by little, it seemed to take on a more distinct form. I tried to ignore the thought. Still, whenever I looked at it, I felt uneasy. The cat also became unusually attached to me. Wherever I went, it followed. When I sat down, it jumped onto my lap. When I walked through the house, it trailed behind me. At night, I often awoke to find it lying beside me. Its constant presence began to irritate me. Soon, irritation turned into fear. The cat seemed to watch me endlessly. Its single eye appeared fixed upon me wherever I went. I knew these feelings were irrational. The animal had done nothing wrong. Yet I could not escape the growing sense of dread it inspired. The white patch on its chest became clearer. To my horror, It now resembled a gallows, a wooden structure used for hanging criminals. The sight filled me with terror. Day after day, the image seemed more distinct. It reminded me of Pluto. It reminded me of my crime. Most of all, it reminded me of the punishment I deserved. Sleep became difficult. Dark thoughts consumed me. The cat followed me constantly, like a living reminder of my guilt. I began to feel that I was losing control of my mind. Yet the worst was still to come. One day, while my wife and I were descending into the cellar beneath our house, the cat nearly caused me to fall. Instantly, a violent rage swept over me. For a moment, I completely lost control. I seized an axe and raised it above my head. The cat escaped my grasp. But what happened next would seal my fate forever. The cat leaped aside and escaped. My wife, seeing my madness, grabbed my arm and tried to stop me. Her action only increased my rage. In that terrible moment, I turned the axe away from the animal. Instead, I struck my wife. She fell instantly to the floor, without a sound, without a movement. She was dead. For several minutes, I stood frozen in horror. What had I done? The violent anger that had controlled me vanished, leaving only fear. I knew I had to hide the crime. The police would search for her. Neighbors would ask questions. I needed a place where no one would ever find the body. After much thought, I decided to conceal it inside the cellar wall. The house was old, and parts of the basement had recently been repaired. One section of brickwork seemed ideal. Working carefully, I removed the bricks and created a hollow space. Then I placed the body inside. When I had finished, I rebuilt the wall so neatly that no one could detect any sign of disturbance. The task took many hours. Yet when it was done, I felt strangely relieved. The body was hidden. The secret was safe. No one would ever discover what had happened. Only one problem remained. The cat. I feared it had witnessed everything. I searched the house for it, but could not find it anywhere. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of freedom. The animal had disappeared. Perhaps it had run away. Perhaps I would never see it again. The thought comforted me. That night, I slept more peacefully than I had in years. The following day passed without incident. Then another. And another. The cat never returned. As the days went by, my confidence grew. The police questioned me about my wife's disappearance, but I remained calm. My answers were convincing. No suspicion fell upon me. Eventually, officers came to inspect the house itself. They searched every room thoroughly. The attic, the bedrooms, the cellar. Every corner was examined. I accompanied them confidently. After all, I knew there was nothing they could find. The wall concealed my secret perfectly. The officers seemed satisfied. At last, they prepared to leave. As we stood together in the cellar, I felt a surge of pride. My plan had succeeded. The crime would remain hidden forever. Or so I believed. The officers were preparing to leave. Their search had revealed nothing. Every room had been examined. Every question had been answered. My secret seemed perfectly safe. As we stood together in the cellar, I felt a growing sense of triumph. The wall concealed the body completely. The police had inspected the room several times and noticed nothing unusual. I could hardly contain my confidence. In fact, I became almost boastful. I spoke freely and laughed with the officers. The more they accepted my innocence, the more certain I became that I had escaped justice. At last, they turned toward the stairs. The search was over. Then, overcome by pride and foolishness, I made a terrible mistake. Standing beside the very wall that hid my crime, I struck it lightly with my cane. "Gentlemen," I said, "this house is remarkably well built." The words had barely left my mouth when a strange sound came from inside the wall. At first it was faint, a low cry. Then it grew louder and louder. The sound was unlike anything I had ever heard. It was part scream, part howl, and part desperate wail. The officers stopped immediately. Every face turned pale. The terrible noise continued, echoing through the cellar. For a moment, no one moved. Then the police rushed toward the wall. With hammers and tools, they began tearing away the bricks. I stood frozen. I already knew what they would find. The wall collapsed. Behind it stood the body of my wife, still upright where I had hidden it. And sitting calmly upon her head was the black cat. Its single eye gleamed in the lantern light. The animal had been sealed inside the wall when I rebuilt it. Unknowingly, I had imprisoned the creature along with the body. For days it had remained hidden there. Now, driven by hunger and fear, it had revealed my crime. The officers stared in horror. The truth was undeniable. My perfect plan had destroyed itself. The very creature I had tried to escape had become the instrument of my punishment. And so, through my own pride, I delivered myself into the hands of justice. If you enjoyed this classic tale of mystery and psychological horror, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more timeless stories retold in simple modern English. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you won't miss our next story. Until next time, thank you for listening.